Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm so glad all of you are joining us as we're recording live here in Austin, Texas. And this is going to be an exciting podcast about church planting. Super pumped about that. And of course, one of our church plant experts, Mrs. Catie Sass, is with us.
Oh, yeah.
She knows a lot about church planting.
I went to college for this.
She did. At the Art Institute, where she had a fashion club. All right, and also joining us with some actual church planners is we have Holland Greig from Eastside Community Church.
What's up, everyone?
And then also from Taylor Bible Church that launched like about a month and change ago, none other than Pastor James Foster. Welcome, Pastor James.
Thanks for having me. All I got. How do you do?
You know, that was a little subdued. We need to have a little bit more passion out of James. All right, we're going to talk about church planting. And I want you to first describe the heart that you have for church planting. We're going to start with Holland Greig. When did you know that you were supposed to plant a church? Ready to go.
Okay. I became a Christian in college. So, y'all all know
At
my
the
story.
Brazos Fellowship.
Before Brazos Fellowship.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Before Brazos Fellowship. I wasn't going to church yet. But I was reading the Bible. And
Why were you reading the Bible?
I mean, how far back do we want to go?
Well,
You want to just real quick, how I came to faith and then church planting?
Okay, well, whatever gets us to church planting.
Okay, so real quick, had some people who told me about Jesus, got interested in the Bible because those people, my Christian friends, lived lives that I thought were awesome. They were generous, kind, loving people. So I was like, man, they always attribute everything good about them to Jesus, so maybe I'll start reading the Bible. Then I started having these really weird dreams, like spiritual attack type dreams where
Like
I'd wake
demonic?
up, like sleep paralysis, demonic.
Oh, yeah.
Felt, even as a non-Christian, I was like, this is demonic, this is dark, something weird's going on. I would wake up paralyzed and not be able to move or speak. Didn't know if I was awake or asleep, and I just remembered that my Christian friends would say, there's power in the name of Jesus. And so I would say Jesus, and that'd be the only thing that I could say. And I would wake up, I could move again. And then, the first time that happened, I had a Christian roommate, and I was like, hey, tell me everything you know about Jesus, and I was like, I think I just got attacked by a demon. Like, will you pray with me? And so after that happened numerous times, this is
The demon attacking you numerous times.
Yeah, sleep paralysis, dreams, the whole thing. It would happen over and over again to the point where I was like, okay, I need.
So this was at
Jesus.
Texas A&M.
Is it Texas A&M?
So there's a lot of demons there.
A lot of salvations there.
A lot of salvations there too.
Yeah, okay.
James can back me up.
Yep.
We got two Aggies here. I really believe though. I was like, man, there's something demonic going on, and I want to know about Jesus. So I started reading the New Testament. This is
Wow.
my sophomore year now. I'm reading Matthew. I get to, and I'm starting to go, hey, I love Jesus. I think like even the first couple chapters of Matthew, I just felt drawn to him. So I get to the Sermon on the Mount. I feel convicted about lust and anger and pride and things that are being called out in the Sermon on the Mount. And I remember just weeping because I was like, man, I just decided that I want to follow Jesus, and there's no way he would accept me. I'm a messed up. I'm a sinner. I always thought I was a good person, and now I read the Sermon on the Mount. I'm like, I'm not a good person.
All right, hold on. When you say, because most people go, the Sermon on the Mount is so beautiful, but for you, it was like terrifying.
It was terrifying. Jesus said, if you, look lustful intent at another woman, you're guilty of adultery. If you have, anger towards your brother, you are liable to the fires of hell. And so,
Which is why, okay, so I think a lot, and this, I don't want to get into like a political thing, but I think a lot of liberal, progressive people go, we just need to do the Sermon on the Mount or live like the Sermon on the Mount. And I think what we're seeing, though, is that Jesus says that's how you're supposed to live, and then you were convicted by that you couldn't do that.
yeah, exactly.
And I think that's almost biblical illiteracy was a blessing to you because you didn't just read that as like, that's just, hyperbole. You thought that, you kind of received that as like actual standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Jesus took the law to the heart, right?
Right.
He said, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. And I was like, I haven't committed adultery.
I'm good.
I can't. I'm not even married. How could I do that? I'm good. I'm one of the good guys. And then he said, but what about your heart? And so that's when I got convicted of my sin. Thankfully, by God's grace, my roommate at the time was a Christian. And I told him, I was like, he walked in on me while I was crying, actually. And he was like, dude, what's wrong with you? And
Wow. So
And-
you're having this like moment with God, and this guy like, hello. Oh my gosh, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget sitting at my desk sophomore year, Dragon Ball Z poster right here on my wall. You know, my
As it
Apple
should be.
computer right here with my little Bible, my little metal Bible that said "Thirsty" on the front that someone
fun.
gave me in high school, NLT Bible. And so anyway, I remember he came in and I told him, man, I want to follow Jesus, but I don't think he would accept me. And he was like, man, I got really good news for you. Jesus loves sinners. And that's his thing. It's a whole deal. He accepts sinners and share the gospel with me.
Wow.
He was like, let's start going to church together. So he was a Christian, but he was not really involved in church at the time.
Wow.
And so my salvation actually kind of brought him back to church as well.
Did you start going to the Brazos Fellowship?
Brazos Fellowship, yep. And so I got baptized there, like shortly after I started attending. My pastor there baptized me, and
When did you start doing sound?
almost immediately. I knew a guy there, and he started discipling me, and he was serving in the tech booth. So this is all leading to church planting, though.
Yeah.
We're still getting there.
No, I love this. This is good.
So this guy, he was discipling me, and he was like, hey, I serve in the tech booth. You're going to serve with me, and I need your help. So I started serving every week. We were doing 3 to 5 services a weekend. The church was growing a lot. It was a little church plant that started exploding in growth. And so I would serve Saturday night. I would sleep there on Saturday night, actually in the tech booth, because I knew I couldn't wake up in time to get there Sunday morning at 6 o'clock when the band started rehearsing for their 3 to 4 Sunday services.
Yeah.
And so I would just sleep there with a little sleeping bag in the tech booth. I didn't tell anybody about that. One time they found me, though, and they were like, yeah, you can't really do that. But so I was serving a lot, and this guy that was discipling me, he was encouraging me, hey, read the word. He gave me a thumb drive with a bunch of sermons on it. And he was like, I want you to listen to all these, and we're going to talk about them. And I plugged it in my computer while I was visiting Austin, actually. My dad lived here at the time.
Yep.
Visiting Austin. And I plugged it in. I listened to one sermon on that. There was like 50 or 100 sermons, like a ton of sermons that he all thought, were really good. And the one that I listened to was about church planting. And as I'm listening, I felt like I heard a call from God, clear as day. Like I cannot describe it any other way other than God called me at that moment. This is what I want you to do with your life. I want you to be a church planter and a pastor.
Wow.
Put very specific, and like I don't have a whole lot of stories like this. This is like the one time where it's like, okay,
Done.
Put some very specific things on my heart with goals and a timeline. I wrote it all down, and at that time, I didn't even see myself as being I thought maybe I could help someone else plant a church, right? And so I called my friend who I knew was a Christian and wanted to be a pastor. And I was like, hey, man, what do you think about planting a church together? Because I just couldn't see.
Yeah.
That's never something I had thought about doing before.
Yeah.
But that ended up not working out. And so I was just like, okay, God, I don't know how to move toward this. But God put it on my heart to plant a church, and to plant a church that was passionate about reaching the lost with the gospel.
Oh, wow.
A church that was living on mission. And I had no idea how to go about doing that. I get offered a job after college with I Am Second in Dallas. Meet you through this.
Yep.
And start going all around the country with you, doing stuff. And you start teaching me how to lead and preach and things like that. And then I still felt like the Lord was calling me to Austin, though,
Yeah,
the church
wow.
plant in Austin.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I ever told
No,
you
you never
that.
told me that.
But then you send me a text message, hey, I'm moving to Austin. Do you want to come? Right? And I'm like, man, okay. I got my way to Austin. And so I think my response to you is like, I'll pack my bags. You teach me how to pastor and plant a church. And one day, so over time, we started talking through that.
No,
stuff.
How old
your
were you at
response
this
to it
point?
initially was just yes. And I was like, that was easy.
What'd you say, Katie?
How old were you at this point?
21 or 20. It was a couple of years after I became a Christian. 22, 21? I think 21.
You graduated college early?
No.
You didn't graduate college.
No.
I did graduate. I left college and then I graduated later
That's right.
because, doesn't matter.
No, I want to hear that story.
I took a CLEP test to test out of my history credit.
Right.
My freshman year, and I got a 55 on it, which is no, that's good.
Oh, okay, I got it.
All you need is a 50 to pass.
Oh, got it.
Except for at Texas A&M where you need a 60. And I didn't know that they had a different requirement, and so the whole time I thought I had. And then the day before my graduation, that I was going to walk the stage, I get an email from the registrar, and they're like, "Hey, just FYI, you can't graduate. You haven't taken history." And so anyway, I was just like, they let me walk the stage anyway, and just gave me a paper that said "Take history."
I love that.
And so I did that later, like a year later. Actually, I did that because of you.
Oh.
I wasn't even going to finish because I was like, I'm already graduated. I already have a job. I'm doing church planting stuff in the future. Like, that's what. And then I told you that one day, and you were like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, graduate college. You literally told me that at an airport. I'll never forget that either. At an airport on the way to a trip. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You have one more class, graduate college. So I signed up that night, and I graduated college, so thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
College graduate right here.
So that was my path toward church planting.
Yeah. Okay. So then, so you moved down, and then that's where we established a 5-year plan, and then we knocked it out.
And the 5-year plan that we had talked about was already something God had put on my heart when I listened to that sermon. I wrote all those things down, and like actually how things happened, like lined up perfectly with what God had put on my heart that I wrote down
Bonkers.
all
Okay.
those years ago.
How old were
Wild.
you when you married Jenny?
25? 25.
So 3 years later.
And then you were 30 when you planted, right? Or no? No, 29.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't remember all the.
You planted in January
We
of
moved.
2017.
We moved to
Oh, so you
Austin
were-
in 2012.
You were 29.
I just care more about the fun parts.
The fun parts. Jenny and I got married in 2012.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
25. She was 21.
I'm
and
like, those
then-
are the real milestones.
And then we planted 5 years later, or 4.5 years later.
Okay,
So I was
fine.
29.
All right. So Jenny's roommate in college was Catie Vineyard, who is now Katie Foster, who is James Foster's wife. And back in the day, Jenny and Katie would come over to our apartment in Dallas and do like a little Bible study with Adrian, I think, right? Yeah. All right, but now let's go shoot over to James with that segue. Let's talk about your church planting journey all the way to Taylor Bible Church. There you go.
Yeah. So we February 21st, 2011, I was a junior at Texas A&M, and I came to faith in Jesus.
Was it you were crying and your roommate came by and said, "Hey, you need to"?
James doesn't cry.
If there aren't tears, is it real?
It's not real. Ain't real if they don't cry.
There were definitely tears, but it was coming to a realization of how simple I was and how much I needed Jesus, and then that weight being removed gave me life.
It's why I think the thing I love about that, and I know not everybody has this story, but it happens a lot like that. A conviction of sin, remorse, like godly sorrow over your sin, and then repentance, regeneration, all that. So I love. I mean, I think mine was the same. Katie's was the same. We all kind of have that. It's powerful. All right, keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was at Texas A&M.
At Texas A&M as a junior. So leading up to that, started just praying, reading my Bible, asking for God to show me who He is, and He revealed Himself in a powerful way.
Wow.
And so about a year after that, or for the next year, there was a lot of turmoil about what am I going to do with my life now.
This was you,
Christian.
because what were you? Were you pre-med at that time?
Yeah, I was pre-med at that time. I had just taken my MCAT, and I was gearing up everything towards that path of practicing medicine, like just thinking, okay, I'll be a Christian doctor, whatever that looks like.
Right.
But in the process, as I started to serve at a Friday church for these kids that don't go to church on Sunday, they get bussed in for this Friday church. I started to feel this joy and this purpose of like, hey, this is actually fulfilling.
Talk to me about the Friday church. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, so it's called Pioneers Friday Church. Phil Kwan, who is a pastor here, also served at that Friday church.
Oh, wow.
A lot of Aggies go and serve there. It's an awesome ministry. What I did there at first is I showed up and I was just helping with a 3rd and 4th grade boys class, just teaching them, just helping the teacher teach them, kind of helping them to focus while the teacher taught and whatnot. And then we'd play games with them. We'd feed them dinner. We'd do some Bible lessons. So it was a good comprehensive thing, but it was like as we got to give these kids their first Bibles and we got to see their eyes open to who Jesus is and what He's done for them, there was a great joy there that was lacking from a lot of my pre-med pursuit, where it seemed like the more that I followed Jesus and the more that I got my identity from Him, the less I needed to prove myself through achievement elsewhere.
Wow. Okay, so then talk to me about coming to Austin. So you graduate, come to Austin. Talk to me about the process.
Yeah, so in between those two, so February 2011, when I come to faith, and then the next year starting to feel, I also joined these I Am Second groups where I was helping to be in these discussions and then lead these discussions, started a couple of I Am Second groups. So that was a similar thing of like making disciples, teaching God's word. This is where the joy is. This is where the passion is. Everything in that pre-med realm started to wane or fade a little bit. And so it was like, well, part of this is just maybe a different season. You might just have to push through the difficult and kind of get stuff done.
Like, hey, school's hard, and maybe because it's sometimes like, school's hard. Man, this is fun. I'll do the fun thing, but it transitioned more.
Yeah, it was definitely like, okay, here's my community of my pre-med society folks that are a little bit more on the cutthroat side. If you miss a class and you say, what did we cover? You're not going to get a straight answer from multiple people.
Oh, because they want to.
They want to pass you up.
Nice.
To get into med school and whatnot. Versus a fulfilling, positive, encouraging, Christ-like community that is going to encourage you and build you up.
Wow.
And so the difference between those communities also created some issues of like, what are you going to do? What do you have the endurance to keep at it with this path? Because ultimately, like, I could see myself successful in medicine because I could outwork folks, but I was outworking folks from the wrong source.
Right. Oh, nice. Okay. So then you get saved. The Holy Spirit's working on you. You want to do stuff. You find yourself really drawn to ministry on a Friday night. Instead of going out partying at Northgate, you're going and sharing Jesus with fourth graders. So then how do you get to Austin?
Yeah. So about a year after I came to faith in February of 2012, I started asking this question of, okay, what am I made for? What am I going to do with my life? I hear about church planting, and I'm fascinated.
Where'd you hear about church planting from?
I think I listened to a lot of Mark Driscoll, a lot of Matt Chandler, and they mentioned it, talked about it. And yeah.
Back in the day, in fact, I think it was either the Villages or Mars Hills web or what's it called app. It just said plant churches or church planting or something like that. It was sort of like a thing. So everybody was on board.
Absolutely. So those guys, and then Ben Stewart.
Ben Stewart.
Those were like the big voices in my head as I was developing in my faith and kind of learning what it meant to follow Jesus. And so as they had talked about it, church planting became just kind of like an obsession for like a week of just like, I'm fixated on it. I don't know why. And then the week after that, it was, well, where do I fit in this? What's my role in planting churches? And then the week after that is when I Am Second, an organization I was part of, invited you to come and speak on campus. And so we had the conversation. So it was, and in that conversation, you said, hey, move to Austin. I'll come serve at this church for 10 years. I'll train you up and send you out to plant a church. and in
like
my...
to a T. Isn't that kind of how it went?
Almost exactly.
Yeah.
You give a little COVID grace there.
Yeah. COVID grace.
But basically, 10 years to... from the time I moved down to Austin to help with Wells Branch, Wells Branch sent me to Hutto to be their church plant resident.
Yeah.
So.
And then how shortly after, when you moved to Austin, did you meet Catie?
Like instantly,
probably
right?
like the next day.
Yeah.
Well, Catie and I had met before on trips to Austin to actually visit here and do prison ministry here.
Because Catie and Jenny came together.
Right.
Yep.
When you and Jenny were dating, right? So Catie didn't know that you were going to be here too.
Right. She kind of knew.
Did you guys go to
an
Passion
awareness of who
together
I
like
was.
in 2012?
2012, January 2012.
Didn't she like rode in a van or something that you were into?
Yeah, that was 2012.
She thought she wasn't impressed with me at first.
Right.
She thought I was just in it for the ladies, which was partially true.
Yeah.
But
But he does have a spiritual gift of good looks, as he's
you gotta
always
cut
had.
some of that stuff out. It's hard. So, as Catie and I, we meet. We've got a little bit of like we're acquaintances.
Yeah.
Right. We're not strangers. We're acquaintances at
Nice.
that point. Yeah. So as we were acquaintances, Facebook friends, getting to know each other, we started talking probably the second day I was here.
And then
Jenny was not the biggest fan of that, but
no,
it's because I was taking her best friend away right before her wedding.
right? You can't do that.
I don't even remember that. I just
Oh,
thought
I do.
we all thought you were cool.
Yeah, you were very cool and kissed Catie on the first day you met her or something like that.
Maybe the second day. but
Okay, yeah.
something
And
like that.
that's like when we knew, like they're gonna get married. It's over.
I just will never forget when you, Holland, had me at whose apartment was this at?
The
was
Preserve?
It James Meyer's apartment?
It was
some-
actually formerly my apartment, which is really weird to
It
think
was
about.
some apartment where like you had this video of like some mission trip you went on. This is before I was a Christian, and I was
Okay.
just like the girl that y'all knew that needed Jesus that like went
Right.
to clubs. So
You were more than you were our friend.
You were, yeah, a legit. You weren't just a project. You were a person.
well,
More
I
than an
appreciate that.
acquaintance.
Even
Okay,
though
but what
that-
is this video? What are you talking about?
It was some trip you went on, and it was like the gospel presentation. And I remember I was like halfway paying attention. But then what I knew was that Catie and James were outside the door, like in the apartment, like
Breezeway.
Breezeway
Oh,
or
nice.
whatever. And I was just like, ooh, them two are like out there probably making out or something. And while like Holland is trying
I'm trying
to
to lead
like show
you to
me
Christ.
this like gospel presentation, but I'm just over here like, ooh, somebody's getting spicy out in the hallway. And I don't remember who else was there, but it was like a group of y'all.
Was this on the game night?
I have no recollection of this
it was
whatsoever.
a different night. I can't remember, but it was like y'all invited me over, and just I was like, okay, cool.
You did
All
go,
right, well,
you did
let's
go on a
talk-
mission trip, right?
I
away.
love this.
I
I
remember
love
that. Was it like Bolivia, maybe?
It was some
I have no
trip
idea.
to like Mexico or something.
Yeah, it was. Oh, maybe it was Mexico because we went to Mexico. Did you?
But
go on that?
you were like
I never.
you, and then who was Jordan Vera's really good friend?
Cody Sparks at
No,
the time.
no. Well, there's a lot of weird things to that. Who? No, it was. Anyways,
All right, so I want.
wish
Do
I
you
That was a
wanna
cool
share-
story.
Good story, bro. All right, so I want to go back to let's talk about church
y'all are
planning
annoying.
and like what led up and how. What are the things you had to do to get started? No, you.
Wait, me?
Yeah.
What was the question? I think you're talking to James.
No, I'm talking to Holland
Okay.
because we got the story like how he got here. Now we're going back to you to tell a
Okay.
story about like what was the prep like? What was your model? All of that.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, like how we decide, we need a place to go.
Oh, I remember this because we were thinking this
You know.
the church planner's graveyard.
Right. I had no idea where, just knew in Austin. And then, I was like, well, where? Where in Austin? Where do we go? I don't really know a whole lot about Austin. And I heard someone mention sometime like, oh, just don't go to like this area because it's like the church planner's graveyard. And I was like, that doesn't sound very awesome, but if that's an area that needs
Jesus.
churches, well, let's check it out. Maybe we'll be the ones that make it. Very naive and maybe arrogant of me of like, oh yeah, let's go to the church planner's graveyard. But it was the South Lamar area,
78704.
yeah, 04. And so we had planned a trip with a couple people that were interested in being on like, being a part of a core team or something.
Because you and I would drive down there and just hang out.
We would, yeah, we would go to coffee shops and walk around and just pray and
use
and
bathrooms.
use bathrooms. Sure. And so I was like, okay, well, let's plan a little trip with some people. And I reached out to a church there in that area that someone had mentioned, said, hey, they might be able to host you guys.
Right. I
So
think it was.
they said, well, it doesn't matter who it is
Oh, yeah,
because I'm gonna,
We're
because
gonna
they ended
slam
up
them later.
bailing on us. So let's not call them out. They
Sorry.
ended up bailing on us though. They were like, hey, you can stay here. We planned a trip, and then like the day before, they were like, oh yeah, we forgot. We have like a women's retreat. You guys can't come here anymore. And so we lost our place, our home base. And we were like, dang, I was really disappointed. Someone on the team, though, was like, I know this other place that we might be able to stay, but it's in a different area. And that place was Mission Possible and the East Side. And so I was all bummed out. They let us stay there, but I was like, man, it's the wrong area. But the whole week that we were going out and scouting and praying and talking to people, trying to look around for places that we could meet as a church, we'd come back to the East Side and be like, man, I don't think this was an accident. I think this is God's providence. Like we were learning about East Austin, learning about Mission Possible, the programs they did. Mission Possible is a nonprofit that's done programs to care
Talk
for the
about
poor.
what Mission Possible is. And
Yeah, started back in like 87 or so, or early 90s is when they purchased the building, I think, on the East Side. But basically doing ministry to the homeless, to low-income community, to a lot of kids and families, single-parent households on the East Side, marginalized, vulnerable. They did programs, kids camps, pregnancy center, food, fellowship, that kind of thing. And so we're learning about all this while we're staying in their building and going, shoot, this is all the stuff that we're passionate about. Like we love being able to do this kind of ministry. And so we asked them, hey, is there any church meeting in this building? It's an old church building, 100-year-old church building that, has
needed
been on
some
the-
repair.
Needed a lot of repair. Still does. But and they're like, no churches are meeting in here right now. And I was like, well, what would y'all think about a team coming down to plant a church in this building in partnership with the ministries that y'all have? And the people that you're serving could not only be recipients of a program, but also belong to a community where they could have fellowship, discipleship, hear the word. What if we started a church here? And that's when we started conversations with planting Eastside Community Church.
So on that specific trip, was Catie a part of that? I don't know. Were you part of that?
what?
Were you
Did you come with us on that vision trip? I don't know.
Were you part of that first Eastside
where we slept
is
at
it?
Mission Possible.
No.
And broke a window.
No, is it not where we all sat in a big circle?
No,
And we
yeah, you
argued
came
about-
in later. You came in later. I don't even remember. Yeah, I don't remember the timeline of.
I don't remember
when you started
sleeping
getting
at
involved.
Mission Possible.
Okay,
Yeah. there was a small handful of we slept at the church, and like it rained on us, and this old building, like rain's coming through the ceiling on us, and there's like rats, and we're like, okay, I think this is where God wants us to
This
plant
is
a church.
God's calling
And,
for our lives. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you started developing the relationship, and was
Yeah.
it like instantly like you're the guy, or did it take time?
It took time. Mission Possible they had dealt with a lot of people who wanted their space but didn't really care about the community or
Right.
their heart for the poor.
How is that possible that you could, and take me to the mindset? I'm sure these are great people that wanted to use the space but didn't have a heart like yours. What was unique about your heart that they didn't have? Talk to me about that
Well,
difference.
East Austin's been changing a lot over the past decade, and there's gentrification going on. And in all these changes, it's expensive, and so trying to find a place to meet, people were very interested in the space that didn't necessarily care about the low-income community in East Austin.
Interesting.
But we're like, this is a building. Can we get into this?
We need a building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe their ministry was going to be at UT or North Austin or something
got
like
it.
that, but they just needed a place to
Got it.
meet. And so I don't know. This is just what I heard from them. I don't know who any of these people are. They just said we've received a lot of requests, but nobody that's really had a heart for the poor in East Austin.
So talk about
So-
the planting part. So you find a space. Eventually they agree. Then you
Yeah.
start developing a core team. What did that
Right.
look like?
It looked like me saying, hey, we want to plant a church on the east side. Here's our heart. Who wants to come? And at that time, we were doing young adult ministry
Yeah.
here at Wells Branch. And so the core team was primarily a bunch of young adults.
And
many
we
of
made
which
people
were
fill
like,
out applications. Do you remember that?
Yeah, fill out application, come to prayer nights, but like a lot of them were still very, very young believers, new to faith, some of them, not in over their heads, not really knowing what all was involved in a church plant. And neither did I. I didn't even know.
None of us knew. And so
Like
church-
looking back on that, did I go about everything the right way? Absolutely not. Did I do the right steps I needed to take in gathering a core team and preparing for a church plant to minister to low-income families in East Austin? Absolutely
no.
not.
But what did you do right? How about that? There's probably things you did wrong, but there's obviously you're still going, so you did something right. So what was it? Because
I still feel bad about us backing out.
Oh,
There
the
was a
sass
lot
is
of people
backed
that
out.
said they would come
Yeah.
down
No,
with us
but I
and
think
then
that's
backed out.
And then
and you can't get your.
We
you
committed and then we didn't.
Well, let's talk about that because I think this is important for church planners. No, this isn't
And I
like-
never forget. I'm just playing.
Let's
I
just-
literally
so
still
Katie, sit
feel
out there.
bad
We're gonna
about it.
roll the bus over you a couple times. No, but there's a lot of truth to like who you start with isn't who you're gonna necessarily finish with, and so
Yeah.
and we talk about that all the time. Like even from charter service to
Yeah.
where you are now. Like talk about that time of, and there was always pressure. I'm not saying from people like Katie, but from people on the core team. We need to plant now. Talk about that pressure. Like, hey, there's a church planter out there. They're wanting to plant, and they've got a timeline. They've got some benchmarks.
Yeah.
Do you hit those benchmarks, or do you just kind of get? What do you think?
I don't know. First of all, let me say Katie, I want you to know I love you guys. There's no I don't want you to feel any kind of it is. I think it's actually there were people who pulled out.
Way
Like
later.
y'all that like
Because we were about to get married.
Yeah.
But we were also talked out of going. Like
Yeah.
someone from the church talked us out of going. Like told us that it wouldn't be wise for us to go. And so we were like, oh.
and you know what? They were probably right. They were probably right. It was probably honestly a lot of people that went.
Didn't.
It probably shouldn't. We probably needed a different team. I say that now. That's not to say anything negative about people's
Disparage anyone, right,
intentions.
yeah.
About I think we all had the intentions of let's go do
yeah.
this thing.
We were excited.
Right.
Yeah.
But planning a church is really hard, and we're working with a very difficult community where we're in a low income community. Most church plants in Austin right now are not focused on reaching the poor.
No.
Just straight up, that's not. People are planting in areas where there are new schools being put up and thriving families, suburban, and churches are needed everywhere. But I think it's important to note that planting a church in a low income
In
community,
an urban context like that.
that's not really happening. That's not where most people are focused on planting churches, even though it's very needed. And there was a lot that I didn't know about what it would take to do that well.
What didn't you know?
and I would say there were some other people who I was like, okay, here's what our team's going to be like, and that changed a lot. And some of that I would say was like my own leadership failures of not knowing what it would take, and so like to the question of, hey, we need to go, we want to hit these benchmarks,
Right.
Like you're wrestling with these two things. One of urgency, people need to hear the gospel.
Right.
Let's go do this. There's people who are far from God, that we need to go. But then there's the other side of wisdom and patience of like, do we have personally the maturity, the wisdom, the experience, the leadership, all that thing to actually do this well so that we don't close the doors in 2 years because we weren't prepared. Like like Jesus' warnings about like, don't start to build a tower, if you haven't counted the cost. And like I would say, we're still going today by God's grace of not because I did everything right on the front end. I would say there's a lot of things where I didn't count the cost of, what it would take for us to be a healthy church.
Because we talked about like, hey, let's get a core team of, I don't know, 30.
Try to get 30. We left with 18 from Wells Branch.
Right.
You always tell everyone that I took like 40 people.
70,
and
100 crippled
Yeah.
us.
18 from Wells Branch. That was our team. And within the first year, 4 of those were gone. By the second year, like half of that team was gone. By the third year, almost everyone was gone.
Right.
So, and part of that has to do with, we 3 years in was COVID.
Right.
So that's a whole other
From
story,
our
but-
perspective, though, it was fun. It's fun. It's like a bunch of people didn't go to your church, but they didn't go to any church, which I never thought this would happen. They're like, I don't know anybody here anymore because all those people left. And I'm like, but it's not like you guys you didn't. But that
I'm
was
sorry.
like it was weird. It was like weird. Anyway, I was like, okay. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
it's a strange thing. Church planning is counting the costs on both ends of it's really.
And some of that you can't avoid. Like no matter what, like
There's
like it's very
losses.
typical, that people are gonna be with you for the first year and then be gone after that. And that's not something to be bitter about either. Like
Yep, you just can't.
praise God for the service that they contributed for the first year.
Right.
But for me, I don't think I had a good I don't think that I had a like robust understanding of really how to develop leaders to plant a multi-ethnic, multicultural church. And multicultural meaning not just like ethnicity, but socioeconomic status,
Absolutely.
Age. We had an intergenerational church. We had mostly young people. How do you disciple older families well who have kids? Like so, the ministry I had at Wells Branch was young adult ministry, mostly singles, young married couples. Shifting to the east side was a lot of families, a lot of single moms with kids that we were meeting in the community. That's the majority of the low-income communities,
Right.
single parent households, single moms with kids who had all kinds of struggles that I had never dealt with before. Like I was completely under-equipped and trained, and I just had no idea what I was getting myself
So here's
into.
what I'm hearing from you, and this might be like oversimplifying it. You took a step of faith, and God blessed in spite of all your weaknesses, in spite of all your
Yes.
Ineptitude, that
Yes.
by the sheer grace of God, you exist today.
Yes.
All right, and
Sheer
so-
grace of
Yeah,
God.
like, but I mean, and maybe we should say,
And like I would say like I didn't quit. There were
Yeah.
many times I wanted to quit.
Yeah.
And
you always have a job back here.
I know, and you always, you would always tell me there's always a job for you at Wells Branch, which I really appreciated. But you would also tell me, Holland, suck it up, don't quit. God put this calling on your life. There is always a job for you back here at Wells Branch, but don't
Yeah,
quit.
don't quit.
Like there's a lot of times where I really felt like quitting, and I would call you, and you talk me off the ledge.
Yeah. And so talk about the not quitting. I think that actually is the most important part of church planning.
This is the one part that sensing a clear call from God.
Okay, good.
For me, is what I would like. I will never forget when God put that calling, how He revealed, the east side and the providence of God and that whole process, that being confirmed through prayer.
I think you needed that to remind yourself of that.
And I would say there were times when I was like, okay, I don't think I'm the guy to do this, like I don't know how to pastor people through these problems. I don't have the experience. Like, God used you. I told you this at like your 10-year anniversary thing as well, but I want to reinforce it now. God really used your encouragement and exhortation to keep me in it. Like, would use Jenny, So I would tell Jenny, let's just quit this whole thing. We're moving out. We're going to get some land somewhere far away and just be away from ministry because I feel like I suck at it and it's really hard. And Jenny would be like, suck it up. God called us to this.
Yeah, let's go.
We're not quitting. And then you would say the same thing. And so I really needed that. In the
Oh,
times
well,
when
I'm
I wanted to
encouraged
quit.
by that because I think I think your church has become, we're like, what year is it? I guess we're 8 years in. Like it's become a
7 January. And
January
so
to
we're
be
really only
8.
6 right now, but
Was it really
yeah.
2017? Oh yeah, right. I can't do math.
Math's hard.
So 6 and change. All right, so here we are, almost 7 years in, and I feel like you've become I don't know, like a real pillar in that community with the church because of you haven't quit, because you've continued to do ministry. People have come and gone, but I think there's a reliable sense of that God's working there. And you've seen not just, clearly our church sent you, and I don't think we sent you much money after that, but a lot of churches sent you guys a lot of money to help you in some hard times. Like talk about like the networking aspect and how valuable that was.
Yeah, so early on, like a typical church plant, the goal is like, okay, you get a little bit of seed money, some support by your sending church, maybe some others, and then by
year 2,
you're weaned off by year 2 or 3. But like with our church, as we grow, our giving doesn't go up.
Right.
Our needs increase.
And why is that?
Because we're in a low-income community.
Because when you say low income, it's like the projects. I think
Section 8 housing.
Section 8 housing.
Yeah, 3,000 families within a 1-mile radius of our church.
There you go.
Mostly single parents who, are struggling kind of day to day to get by, and most of which are not in church at all. Some of which have church familiarity, maybe their grandma brought them, things like that. But for the most part, unchurched and unserved by other churches.
Right.
There are other churches in the Eastside. Many have closed their doors in the past 5 years, and there are some solid, faithful, Jesus-loving, historic churches on the East Side that are still doing really great work. We partner with several of those. We love to work together and collaborate, but there's a lot of need on the East Side in the Section 8 housing, the government-assisted housing, and so when these families come to faith and come to our church, it's not like someone comes to church and it's like, hey, cool, let me start serving and let me start giving. And great, our budget's going up because our church is growing. It's like, hey, I'm coming to this church and I need help with this bill, and I need help with, this broken relationship, and I have this drug addiction, and I have there's a lot of that kind of stuff that comes to where when one family joins our church, and I'm not complaining about this. This is why we started the church, right? But I'm just saying that it requires a lot of people resources to care for that person well, to love them. As well as financial resources. Our church is growing, but we don't have any more money. And so, therefore, we need other churches to partner with us.
So talk about how did that come about, like other churches partnering with you? Because it wasn't, like I said, we give you
we almost closed our doors,
but not
basically.
even close. Right.
Yeah. During COVID, a lot of people left, and went through a really hard time where we before COVID, we had grown to
About 100
to 120 on
Yep.
Sundays, from our small group that we started with.
Yep.
And then COVID hit, and we lost all of our college students. UT and HT closed their campuses. A lot of people moved away, took different jobs. Some people just decided, I'm just not going to go to church anymore because whether different perspectives on masks or politics and different things. And so we got whittled down to a very small group, and
when you say whittled down, 30, 20, what?
20 of us again.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're down to it's almost like replanting.
Replanting a church. And, there was more who would watch online and stuff, but in terms of who actually, was gathering in person and committed to the mission and to the church, it's a very small group. And we were just like, I think it's over.
Right.
I think we're done. I don't, and felt those were one of those times where I would, you talked me off the ledge, where we felt like, no, you're not done. I called you to do this. Don't quit when it gets hard. Keep going. Cast vision, develop leaders. And what happened was through COVID, we lost a lot of people, but the people who stayed were the people who were from the community, right?
Yep.
Who got saved, who became members, who were growing in their faith. And so as we regrew, it was a totally different church
Yeah.
that grew again.
Our church
from
is
what we
totally
started.
different now than it was before COVID
Yeah.
as well. I think that's ubiquitous.
Now, so we're a much different church. When we started the church, we had the intention or aspiration of being a diverse church
Yep.
to reflect and represent the community that we were in, but we just weren't. We straight
Right.
up were not.
Yeah.
And
What about now?
The heart was there, and now we're just completely different.
So God used struggle, wilderness experience for you to fulfill the vision you actually had for your church.
100%.
And then God used His family of, I don't know if you want to give some shouts outs to other churches that really blessed you, but like I think.
Oh man,
Yeah.
The Well, City View,
about
Dripping Springs, Hutto,
Southwest.
Northway. North Village,
All these
Southwest,
different
so many
churches.
churches in our association.
So yeah, the
Point
association.
Community Church.
Not that we're going to give like a shout out to the association Hill Country Churches. Go to planetx.com. But what I do think it's really powerful that all these
I
churches.
sent out an email.
Yeah, you sent out an email
to the association saying, "Hey, I think God's called us to keep doing this. He's working in our church. People are getting saved. People are getting baptized. We're serving the poor. We're making disciples. We just don't have any money, and we lost a lot of people. And will you help?" And churches stepped up, and so huge blessing, who said, "Hey, we'll give this much. We want to contribute." And through that, not only the finances, but the encouragement, the prayer, the camaraderie. Yeah, we push forward, and so we've grown back to around now, from that 20, between 70 and 80 on a weekend now. But it's a totally different 70 and 80. It's
Right.
people from the community.
Yeah. Well, I think
yeah.
that's man. There's so many things I want to just jump on. Like, if you're a church planner, or you're thinking about it. One of the things we're always recruiting to Austin. We need more churches here, but that's part of it. Is you're involved in a association of Hill Country churches that. Not all of them have the people to send, but they do have some of the resources to make sure that happens. So that's really an awesome thing. So, man, thanks for sharing that. James, I want to kind of jump to you real quick. You've just started. You're like, are we 2 months in?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly. So talk to me about you got sent from us over to Hutto. Talk about core team development. Talk about because it kind of was a little bit of parachuting in to Hutto, so to speak. Taylor, which is next to Hutto. But you parachute into Taylor, and then you start developing people from Hutto. Talk to me about how that all worked.
Yeah, so last October, Katie and I moved our family to Taylor, Texas, towards the end of October.
From Pflugerville.
Yep, from Pflugerville, where I'd had a house 5 minutes from here.
Yep.
So got hired in July. In October is when we finally were able to close both deals
Yep.
And get there. This time in last year, we had 11 in a small group that was focused on Taylor and reaching Taylor with the gospel.
So talk to me about that small group.
So I didn't lead it. It was a guy who was going to be an elder at the church that was going to lead it, and he led it with his wife. And it was just people interested in planting in Taylor, maybe, but they were just people that lived.
They
in
just
Taylor.
lived in Taylor.
Right, exactly.
And did that
went
guy
to Hutto
stay
Bible
with you
Church.
for the core team or to the plant?
He stayed with us until January. Late in January, he had to step out. He got a case of
Shingles?
shingles. That's right.
Yeah.
And basically, it was his body's way of telling him his stress levels were through the roof. He had lost his dad recently.
Oh, man.
His mom not too long before that, and had just had to relocate houses from the flood, from the freeze,
gosh.
and all that. So lots of crazy stuff going on.
As this is, I think the perseverance part of it. That's a part of it because I think Holland, you could say there was a bunch of people that started with you, and then crazy things would happen in their life. They move to Idaho, they do all sorts of stuff. They kind of whatever, and you're like not expecting that, and then it's just a part of it. So talk to me about how you persevered in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think everybody's going to be just fine and happy and stay with you, you are a little bit naive. And that it would be awesome if that was the case, because you think about okay, where's the time investment piece going to be, and you will end up investing a lot of time in people that won't plant with you.
Right.
But that's still a win for the kingdom. It's just not a win for your church plant.
Yeah, and I think that's hard.
Brad and I were one of those people.
No, well, and stop. Don't feel this is not a judgment. Don't because you're with us,
I-
and I really
well-
love you being here, and I'm so
We
glad you're
always
not
thought
their
we
church. I'm
were.
glad you're at our church. So
We always thought we were.
yeah. Anyway, don't leave me.
I'm just
The
trying to
sass
figure
is
out where
almost planted
I'm.
with both of us.
I know.
Yeah, and then we were like, shoot, no, I think we were supposed to be here.
Yeah. Which
That's good.
You're
it's-
hearing
it's
from
good.
the Lord.
Hey, I need you here.
I'm just over
Chris
here
needs you.
where do I come in?
This is sometimes it's not about you. We're just encouraging them. So just chime in with some way to go, James.
You and Ryan are going to plant a church
Yeah.
in a few years.
So
maybe.
very soon.
We'll see.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, but okay,
We'll
so
see.
talk to me about like you're at the church plant, the core team's
Yeah.
going. What did you do? Like, I know that sounds like
Yeah.
ridiculous. Did you do a discovery Bible study? And if you did do discovery Bible study, what is that? What did you do in your church plant core team sort of initial thing a year out?
What's cool is that in January, around that time, as we're starting to bring people together and
So
bring people-
January before October, you planted.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So,
about, what,
looking
10 months
9
before?
months, 10 months before, we're getting ready to go. We're getting people from Hutto Bible Church that are interested. They live in Taylor. So everybody who was at Hutto Bible Church who lived in Taylor was encouraged to consider if the Lord was leading them to plant in Taylor.
Nice.
And then there were folks from Wells Branch that we had relationships that started to kind of walk out there and join us slowly.
Yep.
And then there were folks from City View Bible Church that had been going to City View, had been faithful there, had been serving there, and had an interest in Taylor because they lived in Taylor or Thrall or Granger. And so those were also key folks. So bringing all of these people from different places together and forming a community that people would want to be a part of was really the focus of the missional
How
core.
hard was it bringing people together who didn't really know each other? Because when I think of a church plant send-off team, I think of, these people have been together forever. In fact, a lot of Hill Country churches were, everybody was in Bobby's youth group when he planted Hutto Bible Church. But for you, it was you parachuted in a sense. You're gathering all these people. How are you dealing with the personality differences? Because, with us, like, Catie and I have such relationship history. Like, when I offend her, she'll call me later. If, she says something, I'll just say it. Like, we have such history that we can kind of work through whatever offense that we create. But with this, you're creating a community that you're saying, all right, we're all going to be friends and love each other without the history there. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it's there's not really a good answer on the how. At least I don't have. Here's your 10 steps.
I guess. What did you? I think a lot of the stuff is like we learn in retrospect. What I probably should have done was, and maybe you have some of that.
Yeah. So what our main focus was in our missional core group was training for missional activity. So how do you bless people? How do you
bless as in like begin with prayer, listen, each, serve, share?
Exactly. Yeah, the same stuff you guys just did at Focus. Trying to incorporate that into a missional core of 18 to 26, just getting them together and talking about, okay, who are the people that are in your spheres of influence that you're praying for, that you're asking God to give you opportunities to just say, who are you, where are you at spiritually, how can I help you take the next step?
Right.
Where I think we might have taken a misstep was focusing so much on the missional training and not the community building, which maybe is just an emphasis
Wait, say that again.
So we focused a lot on the training.
Right.
How do you understand your identity as a witness, your identity as a disciple who makes disciples, and then rather than let's be a community together and really know each other deeply.
I don't know. I'm asking. Was that the right move, or was it maybe? Did you overemphasize something or underemphasize anything?
I don't know how to do it better. Yet, but I know that we were focused a lot on the content and the idea of like, here's how we need to grow and here's how we need to be formed. And for some people, that's really exciting. They get fired up about it. And for other people, they're missing the other aspects of like, well, but can we just do a small group where we get to talk and share prayer requests for an hour and not make much progress in the training piece? And so you're navigating that tension of, I'd love to do that too, but we are limited people with limited time. And so how do we do our best to come together while also staying focused on this mission? Because we do feel like the Lord's calling us to plant the church, and the time is now for us to start moving.
So
on.
Holland had a lot of single people in his core team. Was more of your core team more family? Because you're in Taylor, which is obviously different demographic. But was it more family, or was there a good amount of singles as well?
Mostly families, mostly couples with kids.
Okay, so talk to me. I think what's important here is I think what Holland, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Holland, single people have all the time in the world. I mean, they're always busy with all their leisure activities, but for the most part, you could call them to do lots of meetings. Would you say that's true or no?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's probably a bad question. All right, but for you, there's a limitation because there's the family, there's school, there's the kids have soccer or football or whatever the thing is. How did you measure time with how much time you could spend time training and developing?
Well, yeah, and not to mention we had a baby in June.
And you had a baby.
Also. Yeah, and then our baby went to the hospital later in June.
Oh, God.
With meningitis. So that was tough. So walking through all that,
so
it was
walk me through that, because I think with all your limited time resource, you chose to spend it on the missional aspect with a sense of urgency, because you knew you were going to be planting in September, October.
Yeah, absolutely. And we created other opportunities for the social and the connecting, but I would reemphasize that a little bit more if we got to do it again.
Yeah. So then, all right. So when did you guys have any, hey, sign on the dotted line that you're in? Did you have a moment like that?
We had a few of those kind of call to
prior
action
to
moments.
the charter service, I think.
Yeah, and so in May, it was in June, which was the same month that we had a baby and everything. We called people to tell us how much they would give for the next 13 months. And so basically, as we're developing our budget for the following year, it was in July. So
Yeah, hold on that one. That's a big
August.
one. So 13. When did you ask for that money? Like, hey, you're going to be giving this much.
We started to have the conversation in June, and then in late July is when we made the commitment for
We
August
did that
through August.
with you. Do you remember when we did that with you, Holland?
Yeah.
Did that work?
In what way?
Like, did people actually give what they said they would give, or was there any resentment when we did that?
No, I don't think there is resentment. I think people understand you're starting a new church. It's going to take some resources, and we got to all be committed to doing that. So, I mean,
I think that's part of it.
yeah, that's got to be part of it.
And Catie, I want you to go back to your church plant experience with Holland for a second. Was there a point, were you at that meeting when we asked, like, hey, what are you going to give? And were you signed up for that point, that part, or had you already stepped out?
I remember there were a lot of meetings.
There were a lot of meetings.
I don't
There
remember.
weren't that many.
Like, Holland just pretty much took everybody's time and just, like, hung out. Do you remember what the meetings were about?
No.
She
But
didn't even remember your sermon from Sunday, Chris. You're going to expect her to remember a meeting from a church
from,
plant
like,
thing
what,
7 years ago?
7, 8
Fair enough. Okay.
No, but like,
No, that's good.
I would say, like, I don't remember. Well, so like, Catie, you bringing up how, feeling like, okay, we wanted to be a part of this,
We
but
did.
felt like God wanted us to stay here. Like,
Yeah.
that's a really important thing. I think there were times that there were people that came with us. Like I said, I didn't really know what I was doing. There were probably some people on the team that I should have said, you should stay.
Yeah.
I was so,
Bring them all.
yeah, we need people.
You were
Come on.
gung-ho about
Let's
it
go do
all,
it. We need
yeah.
people. And I think we didn't have a big team, 18, but I think maybe even a smaller team of people who really understood, had a better understanding of here's what we're setting out to do over the long haul. And I think that was part of my leadership failure stuff of like, I think I failed to cast vision and set expectations.
I thought,
And
well, to be fair, I thought you were really clear in I went with you when we developed the application and you had meetings with people and you said, come and die. I mean,
I remember the
That's true,
application
but
process.
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, we did applications. Come and die. Come on down. Give it.
give your life. Yeah.
But
who can really
for
understand
me
what
to
that
be able to actually effectively, say like, here's what this is gonna look like over the next couple years. Here's what it's gonna require of us. I didn't even know any of that stuff. I didn't, know, so like I have no, people that came and went or who said they were gonna come and didn't come. Like honestly, I'm like, there's a lot of times where in the moment it feels maybe really painful, but you look back on it and you go, it was actually God's protection.
Yeah.
God protecting that person from maybe something that they weren't ready for. God protecting our church from maybe, the culture or just God's grace and saying like, hey, it didn't turn out how you wanted, but like my grace is with you. So like I look back on everything over the past few years and I don't have any kind of like
regrets.
No, I have lots of regrets. I have lots of regrets, but I don't have like bitterness about it.
Okay, good.
I
good,
have
Thank you.
I have a gratitude for God's grace in it all.
Yeah.
I have lots of regrets of like, man, I wish I would have done this. I can't believe I said this that way or I did this that way.
Right.
But I can still look back and go, man, you know what though? God was with us the whole time. He knew what he was doing, and so I'm grateful when I look back.
Well, I think,
Well,
go ahead.
Because there's a lot to say about the people that want to go,
Yeah.
but don't feel called to go, that's not where God is leading them in that season of life, but still want to cheer you on.
Yeah.
Because Ryan and I were so excited.
Yeah.
And like, we love y'all so much. I mean, Jenny was a bridesmaid in my wedding, and
Yeah.
y'all were in our wedding. Like, we love y'all so much, but like that next year, we felt that it was important that we stay at Wells Branch, and then that next year we became community group shepherds here, and then we became deacons here, and
Yeah,
it's like
praise
God just had different plans for us. But I think that there are so many people that want to cheer you on, cheer on church planners, but feel like, oh, maybe the only way I can show my support is by going. Well, maybe that's not where God's calling them, and then they end up still going, and then a year later, it crashes and burns, and they come back.
Yep.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think if we're going to do some C's, can I do a bunch of C's? Calling, character, competency, chemistry. And you need to have all 4 of those C's for a pastor. But I think for a church plant team charter member, you need a calling, character not to quit, the competency just to be able to share your faith, and then the chemistry to get along with others, which is kind of where if I was to sit down, I was like going to kind of create here's my path to church planting. I'd be like, first off, is everybody here called to church planting? Good. All right. Do you have the character to not quit? Do you? Okay, good. Let's go over the competencies, because what we're going to be called to do is share the gospel. And then, do we have chemistry? Do we love hanging out with one another? Because you can sense when a church wants to hang out together. One of the things that we did as a church after COVID was our theme for the year was glad and generous hearts. We said, we are going to party all year. Like, we're going to just kind of be intentional about partying, because we need more chemistry, because everybody that was still here was so different than who was here. I think we had
and it felt really divided for a long time.
Because of all the polarization of politics and everything else. And so we really kind of had to focus there. And so, again, I don't want to, that's not the, here's the solution, do chemistry, and then, all that. But I think those 4 have to be all part of it within your church plant. So, James, so let's just talk about to launch to now. You're about 2 months in. Mm-hmm. What are some of the issues that I think one of the things I noticed is children's ministry space. You're meeting at a church in the afternoon, is 4:00, and you're using their space. They're being generous with you in that way, but you're running into some space issues right off the bat. Talk to me about some of those.
Yeah, so challenges in the space that we're in now would be the children's space and the parking space, especially for a big event like a charter service where you're expecting a lot more traffic than you'd usually have. The servant service is kind of creating a way to potentially have a second service when the need arises.
Talk to me about what servant service is.
So at 3:00 every week, we do an abbreviated service. We do one worship song message that's a little bit shorter. I cut out some of my illustrations, which I'm sure makes it way easier to listen to. No, it's less of a, there's less pausing and there's less let's really settle in here. But we're covering the same message, the same ideas, so that those
how many
folks
people
that are
attend
serving,
that service?
About 20, 25.
Okay, is that, and this is good. So does that feel weird as a pastor to only speak to 25 people?
It's harder than speaking to a full room, but it's my people.
Yeah,
and it's my people that are serving every week, and so I love to encourage them with God's word.
Good.
And, so that's how I
do you do sermon practice? Just curious.
For whoever wants to listen a little bit.
No, but you do it.
But I'm working through probably not the whole thing front to back like we do here.
Yeah.
Like you do here. So.
Okay, so talk to me then about you got the servant service, 25 people. Those 25 people are then committed to serve, which is kind of wild. That's a big number that are serving. For how many come to the second service?
Most of them are coming to the second. Most of them are serving during that second service, but it's roughly 20 to 25 there, and then we have 61 unique attenders in the second.
Nice. So you're looking at 80, 90 people.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. So talk to me then about how you're getting those people into small groups, and how are you multiplying small groups? Are you adding small groups? How are you doing that? Just because here's who's listening. The person listening is like, what do I do once I start? What does your week look like right now? Okay, I got people. I got to get a sermon knocked out for Sunday. But what else do you do right now?
Yeah. So with the new visitors, taking those Connect cards, reaching out to them, seeing if they can get together at some point that week, trying to have another touch with them of getting together.
How many visitors are you getting a week right now?
This week we had 1 card. Last week we had 3. The week before it was maybe 4.
Good.
So it varies.
And do you go have lunch with them? And it's you doing it, right? You're not
as they're available, I try to get together with them within the next week or two, just to spend some time with them.
And so of those 80
hear about their
people, how many
experience.
people do you have in small groups? Or how many small groups do you have?
We have 3 groups right now. There's a neighborhood group that's a neighborhood Bible study with a couple of the ladies. There's a men's Bible study, and there's a women's Bible
Oh,
study.
nice.
And so that's it for right now. But in January, we're launching a few more traditional community groups.
So talk to me about what those groups look like right now.
So right now, they look like the women are going through Mark. They actually cover like 5 chapters in a sitting.
These are
and they
either
meet
they're
every other
very,
week.
very smart or very fast.
Yes, or they're going big picture more
Got
than
it, got
zooming in on a couple places
Oh, I
rather
love
than
that.
the whole
That's cool.
thing. Yeah, and so that's got between 10 and 20 ladies that are coming to that, and then the men's study we're doing the Measure of a Man.
Nice.
Gene Getz,
Yep.
Which will be kind of like our leadership development pipeline and our elder pathway as well to try to discern with folks if they feel called to being an elder, and then helping them help us figure out what that timeline might look like so that we can onboard some more elders.
Yeah,
in the-
talk to
in
me
the
about
future.
both you guys, pipelines, elder pipelines, which is always one of the actually, Holland, real quick, how's your elder pipeline doing over there?
It's dry.
Now let's talk to me about this, because this is one of the things I think you've had to learn the hard way, or maybe you've learned God's way, might be the best way to put that. But sometimes having an empty seat, because we have in our principles and practice the ability to have 7 elders,
Yep.
and right now you have
2,
2.
including me.
Including you. And so sometimes it's better to have 5 empty seats
Yeah.
than to have the wrong person in the seat. Talk to me about that and why that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I just preached this past Sunday. We're going through 1 Timothy right now. 1 Timothy 5, Paul says, not to be hasty in the laying on of hands, as he's expressing, the seriousness of the office of elder and the importance of elders being godly, and if there is sin in an elder's life, how you, can honor the office of elder but still hold them accountable, and it's a big deal. Says they need to be held publicly accountable, right? So like, bringing some seriousness to the office of elder. And then he says, don't be hasty in laying on of hands. So don't bring people on too quick just to put someone in a position, because you think, man, if we had 5 elders, we could get a lot more done. That's a lot more people to make disciples and teach and shepherd and be committed to ministry and things like that. But Paul's emphasis there is like, yeah, don't rush into that, because for their own protection, for their own spiritual life, their own witness, their own walk with Jesus, and for the protection of the flock that's going to be entrusted to their leadership, don't rush into that and put someone unqualified in that
Right.
position. So like, that's where we're at now, is like, we have people, we have a handful of men, like Nikolai and I, we're trying to make disciples, develop, also our staff members, like Trent, Ryan, that are invested in making disciples, but it's like, we're probably a good 3 to 5 years out
From another elder.
from who we have
From
right
who we have-
now.
right. If somebody moved in, for example,
Yeah.
like, hey, yeah.
There's
got
2
it.
ways to, get elders. Either they come from outside already ready, or you raise them up from within. Raising up from within, especially in the community that we're in, where we're having, like, fathers are absent in the home. We don't have, like we have a lot of women in our church and mothers, and, who are amazing, who have been amazing members and committed to the church and serving. But in terms of the men in the community, largely absent or uninterested in spiritual things. And so to develop elders from within the community is a long process. There's some guys that have come to Jesus, gotten baptized, are serving faithfully in the church, who live in the community, living on the east side. Love these guys, but yeah, we're years away from them being an elder, and so we're not going to rush that and put someone in the
Here's
spot.
one thing I want to say about that, because there is a lot of weight on a lead pastor's shoulders, and the reason why that we want more elders, I'm going to speak for Holland. You can say this is not, but the reason why I want more elders is because it's shared weight of the burden of leadership.
If they're godly qualified.
Right.
elders.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've ever put someone in a position that they weren't qualified or ready
Oh,
for?
sure, absolutely. But yeah, but like I feel like what happens is that for me, just on the elder thing, like, man, I'm so grateful for the 6 other elders I have alongside me, because when I have big decisions, it's not like I'm going before the church by myself, everyone's looking at me with laser eyes ready to kill me. It's like, oh, all 7 of us get all the laser eyes, and it's the weight's dispersed. And so for you, Holland, I think I think we need to be praying for you. There's a real burden that you're carrying, that I think if people are listening to this, like, I want you to hear two things. One, it's a burden to be a lead pastor in a church plant, but two, it's a greater burden if the elders that you are asking to lift weight with you actually are like, just kidding, they can't lift anything. And so I think that you're working through that, carrying the weight and adjusting the load, and that's definitely a challenge. So talk to me like you kind of press it. So like you're looking at 3 to 5 years for an internal elder development pipeline.
Right. Yeah, and that's where we've requested support from other churches on the financial side. You know, it's like it may be wise for us to request support on the human resource side of, hey, send some elders. But the challenge is like, if you put someone in a position of leadership who is not modeling what you want people to rise up to, you're hurting the culture you're trying to create. Mm-hmm. If you want to set a culture where, hey, at this church, what we say is we worship, we belong, we serve, we make disciples. And you got someone who comes in as an elder and they're not committed to making disciples, then they're setting a precedent for the whole church of, we say we want this, but you don't actually have to do that. And like that hurts what you're trying to build.
I feel like we need to emphasize that. If you bring an elder on board who isn't making disciples, what you're saying is be like this, and that person might be a stagnant person, not growing in their faith.
Yeah.
And so you sort of learn, because the best lessons in life are caught, not taught. I learned that that's what an elder does is, I don't want to say nothing, but...
Yeah, you say, hey, here's our culture here. We make disciples at this church. And then you have an elder who doesn't do that, and people pick up on that and go, no, you don't, and I don't have to because he's not doing it.
Right. Wow.
And so like you allow a culture to creep in the back door that you're not intending to, because you're like, well, I need an elder, and maybe this guy's really good at finances. Maybe he's really good at administratively. Maybe he's really good at this. He's been a Christian a long time, but if he's not living out the standards that you want to set in terms of the culture of your church and your leaders, then you're hurting the culture you're trying to build.
Man,
and so that's where we're at, is we're saying we'd rather wait and have it be 2 elders or 1 elder until we get to the point where we can confidently say,
that's beautiful.
This person is who we want everyone to aspire to be like.
All right, so that's good. So James, you're 2 months in, and you have how many elders?
2 elders, me and Tim.
You and Tim.
Yep.
All right, and so what is your elder pipeline, I guess, at this point? Are you developing that, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, so part of it is looking at the guys that would be ready potentially within the next year. And so we could potentially roll them on in January, or we could potentially roll them on by September. But we're partially, so the way we're operating right now is Tim and I are leading the church, but then we're also submitting to the Hutto Bible Church Elder Board. And so if there's ever like a stalemate or something we need to bring to them, then we're going to have those conversations.
Do they give you an elder to your elder meeting, or do they do anything like that?
No, nothing like that yet. But meeting with Michael or Bobby regularly to kind of give them updates and chat through stuff that we're wrestling with.
That's good.
So there's a regular meeting there to kind of keep them updated, but also to get the support I need. And then if there's anything that's like, hey, this is actually an elder issue, they'd bring me in to that to have those conversations there.
Okay.
Who's Tim?
Tim Chancellor.
He's a police officer with the Round Rock PD, and then he's also one of their elders.
Yep.
He came from City View.
Yeah. So Tim's amazing. He's going to preach for me the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Nice.
So super grateful for him, and excited for him to be a co-laborer with us.
All right. So let's talk about you guys have been in the church. You've been planted. Let's talk about planting after you've planted. Holland, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, like us planting another church? Sure. Real quick, though, on that thing on the elder stuff, I would say, like, back to, you were asking, like, what were some of the mistakes I made as a leader? I think that's one of the failures I did is I said, here's what we expect from everyone, but people who weren't living like that, I still said, hey, come on, do it with us.
Here's a pass.
They had the potential. And so, like, what I always say in, like, relationship counseling stuff, with couples is, like, marry proof, not potential, right?
Oh, beautiful.
Don't, it's like, oh, he's going to change. I'm sure he'll be like that. Like, marry proof when you see the change. Same thing with a core team or an elder or whatever it is. Like, I should have said in some people, hey, I know you've got the best intentions to live like this, but you're not doing it. This is not the right time.
Man.
So that was one of the mistakes
Well,
I made.
I think that's so I want to marry proof, not potential.
Yeah.
And have proof of being. That's why the Bible says in First.
That might sound kind of harsh to some
it
people,
says
but
about deacons, have them be tested. And I think you apply that to elders as well. Have them be tested first. And so we've done a much better job. We probably have a long way to go, but we've started instilling more of a testing period before we kind of
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so
So planting,
Yeah.
we sent some people out to help. So there, we talk about this idea and the association of being a second seat.
Yes.
Meaning like, hey, we're not the main sending church, but we want to give significant or substantial support to help a church plant. So we did that with Refuge. Refuge Community Church, they were planted by The Well. So Josh Guerrero, that was in 2012, or it's not 2012, 2020, right before COVID, actually. And so we had sent a team. I think we sent
10. You sent 10 people,
Yeah,
which
10
at the
or 11.
time was a ton.
Yeah,
I mean, that was like
we were at
10
around 100, and so that was about a tenth of our church.
10%. Yeah.
Yeah, so we tithed to a church plant, and we sent some money as well. So we sent people and money. Some of those people, were leaders, and some of them are still there. That was almost 4 years ago.
What year was it?
2020.
So 2020, in the midst of COVID, you sent people.
Yeah, so we were 3 years old, and we sent 10 or 11 people out, and we sent some money. And some of those people are still at Refuge, and Refuge is doing well.
Good.
So we've never been the main planting church, though. And,
I love the second seat. And that's kind of how we were. We were a second seater for, we
Right.
sent James, because we're like, capacity-wise, especially post-COVID, capacity-wise, budget-wise, we didn't have the ability to plant James, but James was able to plant through Hutto.
Yeah.
So,
So that may be what we do for a while until we see some more leaders developed and our church grow. But we're committed to church planting. We want to raise up church planters and be faithful in that way. It may be planting, smaller churches or being a second seat, or it may be that there's some men in our church right now, I will say, that I could see in a few years, 3 years, 5 years, us sending out, and we might not be able to send a big team, but we might request the help of a second seat who can send some.
I've heard somewhere that if you don't plant within 5 years, you never will. Like, it's like a weird stat. And so you guys did that. We planted within 5 years of me being here, which is sort of wild. And then we sent 2 more church planters 5 years after that. So, James, talk to me about, is that even on your radar right now?
Yeah, we're praying about a couple of areas. There's Granger north of Taylor, and then there's Thrall east of Taylor.
Right.
So right now we're the eastmost church plant in the association. And if we plant further, then that would be the next.
Yeah, I love that. And so, the only, what Danny Bach said is, if you don't have church planting on your elder agenda, then it's not going to be part of your church. And so, because elders in general, they are thinking about your own church because you have to. And so the lead pastor, the elder chairman, usually have to kind of kick that into gear and be like, hey, we've got to remember to plant because that's part of our DNA. And that becomes super important.
Are you about to wrap it up?
I am, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, with church planning, with it being such a challenge, how do y'all invest in your marriages?
Oh, great question.
While dealing with the drama, because it is drama. It's a bunch of drama starting a church. How do y'all invest in your marriage, make sure your marriage is healthy, your family is being paid attention to, and invested in and pursued, while balancing the pastor?
So to be fair, I love this question, because when we came down here, we interviewed with Hill Country to be church planters, Adrian and I, and John Harrington at the time said, he'd tell, you're going to lose your husband for at least 2 years. And Adrian's like, we're not church planting. And that was it. That was like, that was it. So yeah, talk to us about both. I guess I'd love to hear from James just right from the get-go, because you're right in the thick of it. How do you prevent, I guess, Catie from losing you to the ministry?
Yeah, I think being real in community about how things are going and where you need to step up and grow is important. So just having accountability in that area of somebody who's going to ask me regularly, how are you loving your wife?
Yeah.
How's that going? Is that something you need to improve in? Recently, I set a goal to do a devotional with Catie, because we do separate devotional time, but just grabbing an Advent devotional.
Nice.
We were going to do a marriage devotional, and then we tried one day and decided an Advent devotional would be a better idea. So if that gets more buy-in, then
you know what?
that's what we'll
I
go
can
with.
totally relate to everything you just said. That's good. There's so much under that statement that I've totally picked up on. All right, go ahead. So Advent devotional, way better. Yep.
Yeah, so we bought a new Advent devotional. We're going through that, and that way, that was my goal with my Measure of a Man book group. So I'm being real about that with our community. Of, hey, this is an area able to lead your household well that I want to step up in and do even more so. And so that was an area that was my focus, and that's my application.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been beneficial for me over here is Adrian having open access to elders, and whenever she gets frustrated, she tells them, which is good. Sometimes she doesn't want to tell them; they just ask her questions, and she starts breaking down in tears. So that happens on Sundays every now and then. So how about
Holland,
you?
yeah, Holland, what about you?
Yeah, Holland. Yeah, what about you?
So I love Jenny more than I love ministry.
Yeah,
and that's
good.
really important.
Very important.
Like I genuinely, there's time, especially those times where I was thinking about quitting. Some of it was because of the stress it was putting on our marriage, and I was like, I'm gonna stay married rather than I'll quit church planning, and like I want to make sure that this isn't hurting our marriage. And that's a weird thing because I definitely felt God call me to it. But like what was great about that is Jenny felt called to it as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those conversations, I would go to the, extreme feelings of like, okay, I'm ready to be out. And Jenny would talk me off the ledge, bring me back to my senses. You would have those conversations with me. And this didn't happen a whole lot, but there's a few times where I'm just saying like her feeling really called to it as well was really helpful. If she didn't feel called to it, it would make those hard times really, really difficult.
So
but,
your wife doesn't go do applications for you to other churches?
No, she doesn't.
Oh.
I have heard
That's
of
good.
that before, though.
That's really
one of my friends that mentors in the faith.
Yeah, Jenny and Catie, I can say, both feel so called.
Yeah.
To
Yeah,
church planning with y'all.
and I love my wife. I love spending time with her. It's not something I have to try to like force. So I would just say I'm just really thankful for that. But there are times where we get caught up in doing a lot of ministry and haven't been able to spend a lot of quality time together. And I think you just like, you got to be like, it's looked different for us from season to season. So like, there's not one simple answer. It's like, cause we've gone from having, when we first started the church, being pregnant with our second baby to now having 4 kids and now having kids in school and Jenny being a sub, and we've done homeschooling. We've done like, it's looked different, but I think just like the main thing is saying like, we've got to care for our marriage and our home first.
Man, I really like what you asked, Catie. And I think one of the things for Adrian in the past, since COVID, we usually did community groups together, and it was great. I tend to attract, what's the right word for that? People that have a higher need emotionally and require more
Attention?
Shepherding.
attention. Yep. And Adrian was like sort of like, I don't say wilting, but she was struggling with not having friends that could pour into her.
Yeah.
And so a couple years ago, she just said, I'm going to make a community group with my friends because I need help. And she did. And it ended up being a huge blessing for her. And what I've learned is that the church does well when my marriage does well. And so I think the strengthening of all of her friends, all the ladies in her group has been such a blessing for her specifically. And I think, I don't know, it might be unique to our marriage, but I think that's been a huge win for us of her having, I think Catie really picked up on the actual friend aspect is so important.
Because if you're a pastor's wife, I only know this because Catie and Jenny
are really close to you.
Yeah. And so, it's hard for me to not just like say everything that they've ever shared with me
Please.
along this whole process.
Oh, do share.
But I know because Catie, she's just starting this whole process. But with Jenny, I remember she struggled with like deep friendships for a long time.
Yeah.
And where like Catie and I were here at Wells Branch, and she was kind of in this new season of like, oh, I'm having to like try to form new friendships, along with like supporting my husband while he's, leading this church. And so that's the only reason I ask is because I think y'all are 2 men that do everything you can to pour into your marriage and like love your wives well. Because when I was single, I looked at the 2 of y'all for like, okay, what does a godly husband look like? And so like, I've just always, I guess I'll just, encourage y'all. But
Thanks, Catie.
y'all have always been 2 men that have always, been a good example of like, how do I love my wife and how do I how do I repent when I've made a mistake? How do I, correct this? How do I grow? And how do I pursue my family well? And so.
And thank you for you're one of those people that, when there's a lot of ministry happening in the church, and like deep friendships are hard to come by because you're pouring yourself out for so many people, and there's a lot of transients and things like that. Like, yeah, you've been one of those people for Jenny who she's been able to rely on and count on, and grateful for you and your friendship.
That's awesome. I hate to wrap it up here, but we're going to bring Pastor James and Pastor Holland back next month for another round of Pastor Plek's podcast, and we'll follow up with them.
This was a long episode.
This was a long episode, but you know what? It was worth it. Hey, listen, make sure you share, like, subscribe. If you have any questions about church planting specifically, don't worry. We'll bring them back in a month. So that the number would be 737-231-0605, or go to pastorplek.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're interested in church planting, come to Austin, join us, and we will get you on the right path. So from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.